Thank you, everybody, for coming tonight to our reading workshop. Before we start, I want to pray, and I also want to tell you just a little bit about Building All Children, if you don't know about us. Our whole mission is to build all children, just like our name. We do that through assessments, resourcing families, and through empowerment. When you come into Building All Children and you get an assessment, somebody's already paid for the programming for your child. And you go through the assessment process and you sit down with a child development specialist, and they'll tell you all the wonderful things about your child and things that we need to work on. And you will develop a customized plan for your child. And then we have some in-house programming that we like to offer to families at times. We have building readers and building readiness, and that is a part of our empowerment program. We enrich parents through connecting them with Tulsa area professionals around the area. We also have things like our Build Resource Library, where you can come in and check out materials at no cost to you. We have Tiny Town and community playgroups, and it's a lot of wonderful things to check out. So if you'd like to check out more, go to buildingallchildren.org. And another thing I wanted to mention, and I think I have one in my pocket, and if you don't, I don't, but out on the snack table there's these long little strips of pictures of kiddos. And if you wouldn't mind picking one up, if you're a prayer warrior or somebody who prays, I would like to ask you to take one home and put it on your fridge. And every time you look at it, pray for Building All Children. There's a lot of moving pieces to BAC. I feel like I didn't cover half of what goes on here. But as you pass through the kitchen or wherever you post it, just spend a few minutes praying over us. It would be greatly appreciated. I will pray, and then I'll turn it over to our wonderful presenters tonight. We have our staff coming in and sharing their hearts about kids and about the foundations of reading. Reading is so important. It builds lives, and they're just so passionate about the topic. You'll be able to tell it, and I'm excited for you to get to hear them tonight. So if you wouldn't mind, I'll pray over us, and then we'll get started. Heavenly Father, Lord, I just thank you. I thank you for tonight. Lord, just settle everyone in the room, and Lord, I just ask for peace to come over this room, God. Lord, we're here to learn and to grow and to give our kids the best that we can. And Father, I just pray that you pour into these families, that you give them wisdom and discernment on how best to teach their child how to read. God, thank you for the people in our lives that can guide us and help us as we go through things in life, like teaching our kids important skills. Father, I just pray that everything we say and do here tonight just brings glory and honor to you. In your name we pray, amen.
We are so glad that you guys are here tonight. We spent a lot of time kind of putting this presentation together and thinking through what do we really want you all to know about reading. And what we landed on was that there's kind of 3 different stages of reading. We're going to talk about the itty bitties, kind of that middle preschool age, and then a little bit older kiddos. So I'm going to talk about the itty bitties today and kind of just share a developmental perspective. But first off, I'm Andy. I'm one of the child development specialists here on staff, and my passions include children's literature, recent research studies, I love research, and coffee, I think I said on there. Can't forget that. So what really are the foundations of reading? Well, the ultimate goal of reading is successful reading comprehension. That's kind of that thing we're striving for. That's going to be the ability to process and interpret written information. Readers have to be able to decode words and use their existing background knowledge to construct meaning from the words on the paper. This is also the ability to read is a skill that's developed over time through instruction and purposeful activities. And I think the purposeful activity part is the most important, because I think that we sometimes think, oh, we're going to do all the right things and all these pieces are just going to click together. When in reality, sometimes it takes a little bit more of a systematic approach. So that's what we're going to talk about tonight. But one of the things that I read in my research is that those foundational literacy skills are established in those early childhood years when the brain is super plastic. Does anyone know what that means? It basically means that it's forming at such a rapid rate that new brain connections are being formed nonstop. And we know that 90% of a child's brain connections, those pathways, are established by the time that they are 6 years old. So that means we get a chunk of time early in their life to really set the stage to help them take off with reading and accomplish those skills that they need to accomplish. So this is the reading pyramid that we put together. So I'm going to be talking about that bottom tier, which is the language skills, vocabulary, hearing, vision, auditory processing, visual processing, speech, and print awareness. So those are those skills that have to be in place before they can reach those higher level skills. One of the things that we do here at Building All Children, when kids come in, we're immediately checking, do they have these foundational skills? If any of these foundational skills are missing, it's going to be really hard for them to accomplish those higher level skills. So that next one up there is the phonological and phonemic awareness. That's how you hear sounds, how you manipulate sounds and words. Kathy's going to talk about that one. And then phonics and decoding and fluency, Jean will talk about. With the ultimate goal being the top of the pyramid, which is reading proficiency. Okay, so reading is the start of everything. It's foundational. We have to be able to read, right? Ultimately, the science of reading is inextricably linked to the love of reading. To teach and inspire the next generation, we simply cannot have one without the other. I love that. The reason I love it is because teaching kids to love reading is so close to my heart. I mean, I love to read and I want my kids to love to read. I know that if they can love to read, it can set them up to succeed in whatever they want to do in this life. But we also know that the science of reading is really important too. So those two things have to go hand in hand. All right, so first off, we want to start when they're itty bitty with a text-rich environment. So creating that text-rich environment is one of the best things you can do. And the reason we want that text-rich environment is 1, to let kids know that books are important. 2, we want them to know that books are there to teach us things. And 3, we want books to bring joy. That's my favorite one, because really books bring me joy. So we want to get kids reading books outside of just bedtime tuck-in. I know bedtime tuck-in is super important, but we can actually be reading all day long. So you want to think about ways to flood your home with books. So I got this little basket here. I want to encourage parents to get a basket of books and move it outside of the bedroom. I think we all have lots of books by our beds, but go ahead and put a basket of books in the living room, put a basket of books in the car, put a basket of books in the kitchen where you're constantly reaching for those books, grabbing them, and using them throughout your day. So we can do books during playtime. Let's see here. Maybe I didn't bring anything for playtime. Books outside, I want to show you guys this one. This is one of my kids' favorite books. It's about nature. But there's a page in here, a spread that's all leaves and flowers. And my daughter loves to bring it outside with her. She gets her magnifying glass. She goes and picks flowers out of the flower bed and tries to match them up. This is reading, right? It's real life reading in a way that's really meaningful to her. Books on the go. I have a friend that loves this book. She takes it to the zoo with them every single week. And while they're there, she's trying to match the animals in the book. And then she has a clipboard that she writes the names of the animals once she's seen them with a little check mark. So you can take them on the go with you. I love having that basket of books in the car so that if they're bored in the car, grab a book. Even if they are not reading, they are still reading the pictures. So even if they're not reading the text, they're looking at those pictures, they're saying, I see a helicopter, or I see a zebra, or what is this? Or sometimes it's a book you've read over and over and over again, and they're able to use that book to retell in their own words. Beautiful. And of course, books at bedtime. Books at bedtime are my favorite. My kids love their time to connect over books at bedtime, so that's super important as well. So books are about so much more than just reading. Reading is made powerful through powerful conversations, and books are an incredible springboard for those conversations. You can use reading in that way. So for the itty bitties, so newborns, I grabbed this book to show you guys. This is a cloth book, but when the newborns are reading this, quote unquote reading it, they're gonna gaze and smile at them. They might practice turning the pages. They might even chew on the pages. They might study the colors. They might study the texture and the sounds that it makes. These are all those foundational skills that sets them up for success. So toddlers, they can point at pictures. So you might get these seek and find books and they're, oh, look, I see an orange, or where's the octopus? And they have to look around and say, there it is, right there. So you can use all of these different books and use them as a springboard to ask questions. Not only are you asking questions about the pictures, you're asking questions about what do the words sound like. Let's clap the words, let's whisper the words, let's see if we can think of a word that rhymes. It's just a way to use words in a fun way. Preschoolers, let's see here. Preschoolers can use stories to identify feelings. So when you're reading, you might say, oh, here's this character, Susie. She seems sad. Why do we think she's sad? Show me your sad face. Or what's a time that you were sad? So you can use it to identify feelings, make predictions, follow plot points, and even ask questions like, why do you think that happened? And then school age, really the sky's the limit. This is where kids are starting to develop their own passions. We don't want them to get bored with reading. We want the reading to be exciting. So I actually went into my daughter's room, to her desk before this, and I grabbed some things that are examples of things that you can be reading that's not just a book. So let's see here. I found one of her journals. Don't read it, it's private. But it's a year in her life journal, so there's little prompts for each day where she reads the prompt and then she gets to write in it. I grabbed here, she has a little magazine. She has a little magazine subscription that she reads. This is incredible reading, very on topic to what she's interested in. I grabbed one of her sticker books. She likes ocean animals. So here she's working on her stickers, but she's also learning lots of facts there. And then this is my favorite. She loves hand lettering. So she got this for Christmas last year. So not only is she reading books, but she's also looking at these instructions. I mean, that's real life work. I read instructions all the time, so it's incredible for her to do that and then practice those skills. So you can really use reading. You want kids to be reading all kinds of things. All right, so this is where we get into the research a little bit. This is where I get a little bit nerdy. But the human brain is not naturally wired to read. That was kind of news to me the first time I heard it. It's like, that's crazy. Reading is actually a set of skills that have to be explicitly taught. Number one, we are all born with the ability to process oral language skills. So we actually have a language center of our brain that's set up to take language and make sense of it. We actually have a visual center of our brain where we're wired to see images and to make sense of what we see. But we are not born with the connections that bridge the gap between those two things. Reading instruction helps our brains translate the written symbols to the language and meaningful information. This is a multi-step and higher level skill that requires millions of brain pathways to develop. So those two things are not automatically linked. We have to figure out how do we bridge that gap. And there's kind of 3 best practices that we can use as kids are little bitty to start bridging that gap. First off, the shared book reading, just like we talked about. Connecting over books, talking about books. And number 2, authentic open-ended questions. So yes, questions while you're reading, but also questions about their day. So anytime we're building language skills, we're also building reading skills too. So you want to be asking, what's your high and low of the day over the dinner table? My sister and her family call it roses and thorns each night. So you can think about different ways to kind of spur on questions. We want lots and lots of open-ended questions. Ask about what movie they saw. What was the storyline of that movie? Well, what happened in this detail? And then lastly, language games. So these are going to be spontaneous, brief, on the go. I think these are best done in the car while you're driving around town. Figure out some sort of language game to play. I think Kathy's going to cover this and give us lots of language games to talk about. But things like I Spy, rhyming games, things are going to get kids thinking about words and how words are put together. So those are going to be the foundational skills, and now Kathy's going to talk about phonological and phonemic awareness.
Okay, hi everybody. I'm so glad you're here. Like Andy said, I am Kathy, as you can see. I have a degree in early childhood education, and I taught first grade, pre-K for many years, and I'm so excited to be at Building All Children now. And my hobbies, I love playing tennis, I love cooking, reading, spending time with, I have 2 older girls who live on opposite sides of the country, and my dog. So those are the things that I love, as well as all things reading. So I, as Andy said, am going to be talking about phonological awareness and phonics. This quote I think is so interesting. The 2 best predictors of early reading success are alphabet recognition and phonemic awareness. So as Andy talked about, the oral language as well as visual. So that's what we are going to talk about. So first, phonological awareness, which I started teaching a really long time ago, just phonics. So phonological awareness was kind of a new thing to me as well. But phonological awareness makes perfect sense. It has to do with oral language, which of course our children hear everything before they're able to read anything. So it can be done with your eyes closed. So most of the games that we can do with this are things that we are just listening to the words, we're hearing them, we're manipulating sounds in the language, which includes blending initial, medial, and final sounds, segmenting, adding to words, deleting from words, and substituting things in words. Again, just that words that we speak can be broken apart. We break down syllables, which are units or phonemes. So a phoneme, hence phonological awareness, is the sound. So as you know, our alphabet has 26 letters, but there's actually 44 phonemes. And those sounds are made, vowels obviously have more than one sound. We have digraphs, we have R-controlled vowels, so there's many more sounds than there are letters. And we combine those sounds to make words. And making the sounds correctly is a really important thing too. So for example, when you're teaching the sound of B, we say something really short and clipped. Our sound is B, it's really short, not ba. Same thing with all the letters. Make sure they're short and clipped, because later on, what Jean will talk about when they're actually decoding and creating words, you need those short clipped sounds for them to go together smoothly to make the words. So that's a really important part. So let me talk about this up here really quick. So the first thing we talk about is rhyming, and I can't say this, you guys. So like our words sock, lock, and rock. Do these words rhyme? So that's phonological awareness. Segmenting usually begins with compound words. So like the word butterfly, we would talk about the whole word butterfly. Can you take it apart? Butterfly. Initial sounds, cat, car, can. What sound do you hear at the beginning? Final sounds, bat, mat, sat. What sound do you hear at the end? Syllables, like the word wagon, we would clap it out, wagon, 2, how many syllables that you hear. And then with blending, again, it begins with a compound word. So we would start with 2 separate words, foot and ball, put it together, we have football. And then later on, you would move to like the word cat. We have k and at, and put it together, cat. So those are some examples of our phonological awareness. Again, like I talked about rhyming for just a second, rhyming is really important too. It's language play. It's developmentally appropriate for primary age children. Hearing and playing with our language is important. Many kids, I've learned, haven't even heard a lot of the nursery rhymes. And so it's really interesting. I do that in a class that I teach at Building All Children. which things that I think they would all know and they've never heard of them. So it's kind of fun to do nursery rhymes, poems, silly songs, tongue twisters. And one of the things that you can do while you're reading repetitive text with rhyming is let your child fill in the missing word. Like brown bear, what do you see? I see a red bird looking at, and let them fill in me. Or 1, 2, buckle my shoe. 3, 4, shut the door. And that will be something that will happen after you have read that a few times and they start hearing that. And so that's a fun way you can work on rhyming. Obviously, rhyming, middle and final sounds are the same. So then, let me see what my next slide is. Okay, so phonics. We'll move on to phonics. So where phonological awareness was oral, that we could do with our eyes closed, phonics is written language and print. So doing phonological awareness and phonics together is a great program. You're hitting both oral and visual. So phonics is written language and print, it's visual and auditory, and it's the letter and sound relationships. And I thought this fact was kind of interesting, and I really wasn't aware of it the first time I heard it, but 84% of English words are phonetically regular. So it seems like there's so many words that actually don't follow the rules, but it's really kind of a small percentage. And Jean will talk about that a little bit more when she goes into sight words. But so both phonological awareness and phonics are essential for reading proficiency. And again, both of those things come before decoding and reading. So here are some activities to practice phonological awareness and phonics. I also want to show you really quickly, I'm sure many of you have flashcards at home to work on letters and letter sounds. So we do our flashcards a few ways, but one way is obviously the letter is A, the sound is A, and then repeat. But another thing you can do after that is just hold up a card and say, what sound? Don't tell me the letter. Don't tell me the letter name. Just tell me what's the sound that B makes. Well, actually, you wouldn't say that. But what is the sound that this letter makes? B. And you're just looking for the sound. So that's another way that you can go through your flashcards a little bit differently and working on sounds. So what sound does this make? K. So that's it. That's just an additional idea for your flashcards. But here's a lot of activities that you can do. Marching or clapping to words in sentences. So when you're reading or just talking, you can march. The dog went to the store. You can clap. Clapping it out, sing any song or nursery rhyme and clap out the syllables. So twinkle, twinkle, little star. Clap the whole thing out. You can play I Spy with words, play the game with sounds. I spy with my little eye something that starts with the T sound. Wait for your child to shout out something they see that begins with that sound. Rhyme time. I'm thinking of an animal that rhymes with log. What's the animal? Dog. What else rhymes with dog? And I'm finding that rhyming takes a little bit extra. A lot of kids don't hear it right at the beginning, so it's something that you really need to work on. Again, working with the nursery rhymes and the poems and silly songs and tongue twisters just over and over and over in the car. Anytime, work on that rhyming. So syllable shopping is something fun you can do. While at the grocery store, have your child clap the syllables in different food names, like strawberry, strawberry, or ham, ham. So you're just clapping out the sounds that you hear. A sound scavenger hunt, choose a letter sound, then have your child find things around the house that begin with that sound. And that's it. So thank you for listening to my part about phonological awareness and phonics.
I'm Jean Evans. I didn't even read this because I'm just all about the content. But I was a teacher for a long time. I taught for 25 years at Jenks. I've been retired for 10 years, and I have developed even a greater passion for reading than I had when I was a teacher, and I run the reading program at Building Old Children. I don't know what else is in there. I love my family. I like fitness. I hate that picture. So I'm going to talk about the next steps. So we've talked about phonological awareness. We've talked about building the skills. I'm going to talk about the next steps. And I want to tell you that teaching reading really is kind of rocket science. It's hard. There are things that have to happen. The science of reading has become very, you hear it all the time now. For my years as a teacher, and I was a special education teacher and a regular education teacher, I didn't have a very good roadmap. I knew what to do, but I didn't have a very good roadmap to get there. We do now. The science of reading is very clear. You must teach kids to decode words. And decoding and encoding go together. Decoding is sounding out the sounds, orthographically mapping the sounds. It's hard. We're not wired for it. We have to teach it. And encoding is writing. If your child knows the consonant B, and he knows the consonant A, the vowel A and a consonant T, and they can read bat, they should be able to write bat too. They go hand in hand. So I'm going to keep coming back to this quote, but the practice of linking sounds to print is really the heavy lifting for beginning readers. It's hard. Practice with what they've learned will give them a chance to build automaticity. The problem is, if you don't have a scope and sequence that follows exactly what to teach when, your child's going to be full of confusion and questions, and there'll be a lot of guessing happening. And a reader doesn't have to guess. So I want to talk about scope and sequence, and I'm talking about phonics right now. If I say phonics and in your head you think of a worksheet, and there's a picture of a pot, and there's a P there, and there's a blank, and there's a T there, and the child writes an O, that's not what I'm talking about. It's different now. It's not that. So giving a child a worksheet to learn to read is not what we're going to do. So I want to talk about the scope and sequence. The first thing we teach a child once they have the letter sounds and they have the short vowel sounds is consonant, vowel, consonant. And consonants, any letter that's not a vowel, and then of course vowels and a consonant. That's called a closed syllable. And a closed syllable, a child should understand that makes a short vowel sound. No matter what you do, if it's a CVC word, it's a closed syllable and it will say the short sound. And then once they've got that, they can read a lot of words. You could put bat and hat, and your child is reading and writing. Then we combine CVC words, two words together, and that's really big stuff because there's two syllables. They can read two syllables, bat, man. They can know exactly how it sounds. One thing else we teach right now in this time is that if a consonant is followed by a vowel and there's not a letter after it, guess what? That syllable is open. And that vowel gets to shout his name, the long sound, out the door, such as go and she and me. And so, my gosh, the world is blowing up. But I love the fact that if you teach this sequence and you're very careful with what they're practicing with, there's not a lot of questions happening. They know how to read what's put before them. So I might say a quick moment, well then I'm going to go on. CVC with a blended sound, so in a scope and sequence, then you would teach, once they've got these two concepts, well three actually, the open syllable, then you would teach all the blends. The blends are two letters that go together, and they're still one consonant. TR makes one sound. It doesn't make two sounds, so it's still a consonant, vowel, consonant word. Like in these sounds, chip, drip, jump. They're still closed syllables. They're still CVC words. So once that happens, you can read a lot of things. And then this is all first grade, maybe a little kindergarten. But CVC E, where magic E comes in, and that tells the vowel to say its long name, like lame and time, that's the end of first grade. And that sometimes when this happens, this is really hard for readers to wrap their brain around. They've been saying short sounds or else open syllable words for a long time, and it's really hard to make that switch. So you've got to give kids time. Practice with what they've learned will build automaticity. And then vowel teams come, and E-E-E-A, they both say E, that happens. I want to say a quick word about sight words at this moment. I tutor lots of kids at Building All Children, and I've been seeing kids that come in with like lot of words they have to learn for sight words. That is not necessary. Sight words are words that don't sound out right, such as the word said. Said should be S-E-D. It's not. That should be a sight word because it's used a lot in reading. What? That sounds like W-U-T. It's not. So those kinds of words are important to have for sight words, not a big long list, because you're going to teach a kid how to read, a child how to read. They don't need a big long list of sight words. Does that make sense? So the thing about this is that it all flows together. One step goes on the next step, goes on the next step, goes on the next step. The missing piece, the hard piece, is what do I get to give my child to read so that they can practice what they're learning? And this is kind of a new thing in reading instruction, because we have now what's called, would I do that? No. We have now what's called decodable readers. And I want to show you some. So how can you help? I want to make sure I didn't miss anything though. Okay, got it, I think. So the next slide is going to talk to you about the kinds of texts that you should have to teach a child to read. And you can see in grade K, grade 1, grade 2, grade 3, that inverted triangle is called the decodable reader. And what that means is whatever your child has been taught, that's what the text should have in it. No surprises. No silly word like ceiling. Okay, it should have words that they know. And you can see as they get more and more skills, then that decreases. And the trade and leveled books, that increases. So we have to get the right kind of books in the hands of beginning readers so they can do that heavy lifting of practicing. Repetition is huge. Unfortunately, you can't go to the library and get decodable readers because the decodable readers are made by the book companies that you follow the program. There are some out there, and I'll show you some, but that has to happen. And what we do is at Building All Children, we of course have a curriculum that has decodable readers, and we practice reading them more than once. We practice them several times. It's the heavy lifting of reading. You want to build automaticity, so the lessons follow the text. The last column is, in children in this level, you're reading decodable text to practice what you know. This is your interest. This is what you like. This is building vocabulary. This is building background knowledge, which all those things are very important for building comprehension as a reader goes. So and many children can read a book above where they're at if they're excited about it. They may not read the words, but they're getting interesting things from it. This I want to talk about, and I've got examples of all these, but I want to talk about read alouds. It's not the teacher read aloud, it's a teacher and parent read aloud, and it's so important. And I preach this all the time, but that was my favorite and actually the most powerful time of the day is the read aloud, because you can talk to a whole group of children. You can teach so many things by a shared text. You can develop vocabulary. You can talk about author's purpose and author's style. And why did the author there's so much that can happen. So do not ignore, while your children are doing the heavy lifting of learning how to read, do not ignore read alouds. And if any child tells you the movie's better, they're not telling the truth because they're not. The books are always better. But I want to show you some books. So we all know about books. Incredibly boring. I'm sorry. They're black and white. They're not fun. But this is a decodable book that really does what they say. They follow a scope and sequence. If they say short A, it'll be short A. If they say short O, it'll be short O. You need to know where you're at in your teaching, if you're a homeschooler or where your child's teacher is. And if your child's in a public school, I don't know who I'm talking to, but if your child's in a school, a private school, public school, you probably need to have a conversation with the teacher. What is your scope and sequence? What are you working on? What's this month going to be, or what's this semester going to be? And if they say things like, we're reading around the room, or we're getting our books and going to a corner and reading, you probably need to figure out how to teach your child to read, because it's not happening. And I don't mean to be ugly. I was a teacher. I get it. It's hard. And this is another really good decodable book. This one came from Learning Dynamics, a really cheap box of books to help teach your kids to read, but it follows the scope and sequence. So it's true. These are wonderful. I've discovered these are chapter books for those early readers that they're just CVC words. There's no long vowels in here, but they're kind of expensive. I'm not pushing them, but it's for that child who's older who really can't read, but they just want to do a chapter book. Those are great, and I've got a handout that'll have some of these on them. This is put out by a reading company. This is a decodable reader. It's short sounds. Okay. Now I want to show you some that aren't. This is a Usborne. We love Usborne. And this is one of those books where Mama reads this part, but this part is CVC. It's a good beginning. There's another one here, though, that is Usborne Phonics Readers. And just because they put phonics on the cover doesn't really mean they follow a scope and sequence. This one does not. There's all kinds of things. There's A-W, O-U, all kinds of things. So this is a wonderful book to read, and repeated reading, your child could jump in, but this will be frustrating for you and for your reader. And then I just wanted to show these because all these step into reading books, they have numbers on them. I don't know what the numbers mean. They don't mean anything. So get them, they're great, but they're just, they're not following a scope and sequence. When I talk about trade books and leveled books, I'm talking about books like this. I don't know why I put these stickies on like I didn't know what this was. These are great. These are wonderful. And there's going to be hard words in here, predator, but that child who loves wild animals, you're going to read it to them, they're going to enjoy this book. Does that make sense? And for read alouds, you don't always have to do a chapter book. Picture books are amazing. They're fun. A lot of conversation here. This is about a grumpy old man. The illustrations are amazing. This book, deep. And I'm not just pushing this book. There's a million of them. Go to the library, find books. This book is so deep. It's about a child whose dad came back from fighting in a war, and they're kind of getting reconnected. So those read-alouds don't have to be chapter books, but they can be. BFG, Summer of the Monkeys, it's a little bit because of Winn-Dixie. Great chapter books. Okay, so got it? Moving on. I wanted to show you an example of a decodable text. This comes from the University of Florida Literacy Institute. They have done a lot of research, and they have provided some great guidelines out there for teachers and homeschoolers. A lot of school districts are using them. Their teacher's guide, I think, costs $70 or $90. All this is free. So you get on them, and I've got it for you. But the neat thing about this child has just learned NK. And so there's a lot of repetition. Hank has a job at the bank when Hank gets to the bank. So one of the things I like to do is, if you're using something like this, is go through and underline the red words. When, what, my, red word. Those are words that should be on your sight words. And then it's really great to engage a child in marking up the text. What did they just learn? What did they learn before? So there's the NK. We previously learned LL. We previously learned the SK, SN. So mark up the text, let it be theirs, and then practice reading. Repetition, you've got to read it more than once. You've got to read it more than 4 times. Practice it. This is the heavy lifting that readers have to do. And this is very sequential in their website. You can print them off, they're free. And then I want to say just a word about fluency. Fluency is not the same as reading fast. There's something called prosody, which is reading that shows you understand the text. You stop at the noun, you have the predicate part, you have prepositional phrases. When you read with prosody, you read showing that you understand. Kids just can't do this automatically. So one of the things, I'm going to flip back here. One of the things that you can do with a text like this is you can mark up the text like Hank. Okay, we're going to stop there a minute because that's the noun. They don't have to know that's a noun, but we're just saying that's a noun. Has a job at the bank. See how we're flowing through the prepositional phrases? The kids, I teach them to scoop those phrases. When Hank gets to the bank, he sniffs a bad smell. And do you see how I'm reading with prosody? I'm talking, I'm telling a story. I'm not just reading the words. This does not come automatically. This is hard work. Kids have to practice it. So repetition is very, very important. But I want to tell you a fact that I was just blown away by. Okay, this is a puzzle. There's a child, and he's got very adequate vocabulary. He's a really strong decoder. He's learned how to decode words. He has a good recognition of sight words. I'm going to talk about comprehension next. What do you think? How many kids with this set of skills will struggle with comprehension? The answer is less than 1%. If you teach kids to decode and they can read what's put in front of them, they will comprehend. And I see this over and over and over with kids I tutor. Unless there's a factor such as attention, that if they can learn to read, if they can decode the words, if they can get through the text, they will be a fine comprehender. So I want to talk a minute about comprehension, and that's the tip of the top of the triangle. So I always say to students, are you thinking? Because if you're not thinking when you're reading, you're just reading words. So constantly remind your children, are you thinking? Can they read it? Can they get through the text? Do they stop when they lose track of meaning? Those are important things. You need to encourage it. It breaks my heart when I see a student that can really not read, but they've figured out how to skip words and omit words and go back and forth, and they're okay at comprehension. It breaks my heart because they can learn to read, but they're in 5th grade now. We've got to go way back, way back. So higher level comprehension is always the goal. And one of the great things that you can do when you're reading your reading alouds is develop that higher level comprehension. I think Andy talked about it. Just the conversations that you have develop higher level comprehension. And believe it or not, those higher level skills come from conversations. They don't just happen in your brain. You bounce off each other. So if you're homeschooling, make sure you're having lots of good conversations. And then when you're talking with kids, go for the inferences. The inferences are the things that aren't stated in the text. They're not detailed questions. If you're just answering detailed questions, you're not developing comprehension. So go for the inferences. Why do you think that happened? What clues did you have? And inferences are based on your background knowledge and what you bring to the text. So you've got to do a lot of talking about that. What was I going to say? I think that's it. But I have one thing I want to close with. And I hope I can do it without crying. Yeah. One of my favorite authors is Kate DiCamillo. She wrote so many good books. If you need a good book, just go to her. But listen to this. I signed for a package last week. The delivery guy said, this is from Kate. Kate wrote this. I signed for a package last week. The delivery guy said, DiCamillo? I said, yes. Wait, he said, did you write Because of Winn-Dixie? I did. Oh, wow, he said, my 3rd grade teacher read that book to us. I'll never forget it. And then he smiled at me, this radiant, beautiful smile. And I suddenly saw him as an 8-year-old kid, sitting in class, listening to a story. That man's 3rd grade teacher is out there somewhere. And I wanted to let her know this. He remembers. He remembers you reading to him. I'm just sweet. So, that's all I got. Questions?
We'll do a question and answer, so if anybody has any questions, we can ask them now. I have a question if nobody else does. I'll start. My question is there a list of more meaningful sight words that we can find?
It probably depends on what you're using for instruction. Because there's the Dolch list, there's what's some of the other ones? There's a million of them.
Fry.
Fry, yeah. And I think those two are probably the most basic. But I wouldn't go crazy with it.
Just use common sense.
Yes. Yeah, I forgot something. Can I jump back in?
Yeah.
I made these for you guys because retelling is a huge comprehension skill. And you can do this with any book you read, even a decodable book. And so they're little flip things. So tell me who the characters were. Describe the setting. Can you retell the story telling me the beginning? What happened at the beginning of the story? What happened in the middle of the story? What happened at the end? You just taught your child summarizing. It's very important. And then, so I had my volunteer make these for you. And then I also have the UFly web addresses where you can get some of that decodable text. I'm sorry. Okay, I'm done now.
So I'm homeschooling a child with special needs with some intellectual disabilities. Do you have recommendations for teaching reading for intellectually disabled children?
Yes. We have a lot of children that have, I can't tell you for sure because I don't know your child, but every child needs,
Okay. You can stay there.
okay. Every child needs sequential instruction. UFly would be a great resource. I think that's my number one recommendation right now. We use an Orton Gillingham-based program put out by IMSE, which is Institute of Multisensory Instruction. UFly and IMSE are very similar. IMSE is very expensive to get trained in. UFly is very cheap.
Yes.
I have a 7-year-old who really lacks confidence with reading. I know it's like a very broad question, but what is the best way to instill like confidence in what they've learned?
Repeated reading.
What?
Repeated reading. So get him a text that he feels good about, that he knows he's been taught everything, nothing's a surprise, and read it. Read it to your stuffed animals, read it to your little sister, read it into the phone, read it. Get proficient. Don't worry about time, but just read it and do that scooping. Just let him be successful with what he knows and just build him up. Yeah, reading should be fun. Kate DiCamillo says, reading is a gift to give kids. It should be fun, but I see so many defeated children. I know what you're saying. And he's probably picking up books that have surprises in them, words that he can't get. Is that right?
Yeah, and just like overwhelmed, like
Yeah. Yeah, do I have to read the whole thing? I hear that all the time.
Comparison to peers.
yeah, that's a big issue.
Uh-huh. So print off some of those UFly things. Is he in, what grade is he in?
It's my daughter, and she's like between 1st and 2nd grade.
Okay, print off those and practice those. Those are going to be beginning, easy, wonderful readers. Maybe get those paperback books I told you about. He's reading a chapter book.
Yes.
That's big stuff. Read chapter 1. Yeah, so you just have to provide the heavy lifting, but make sure it's easy and just repetition.
Okay, yeah.
It doesn't happen one time. It doesn't happen 2 times. It doesn't happen 3 times. And write anything he can read, he should be able to write.
Okay, yeah.
I didn't tell you one thing, but okay. When you're encoding a word, spelling a word, we use this finger. If you're right-handed, so wait, I use this thing there. It's going to be like this though. So like the first sound, B, write the B. A, write the A. T, write the T. It's a finger-letter correspondence that helps kids keep track of where they're at in the word. And it doesn't have to, we use a little finger. It could be a 1, 2, 3. But even on multiple syllable words, like where the syllable breaks, you lift up your hand. So the word open, O, then you're done with that first syllable. Then start again, P, E, N, open.
I have a question. Nonsense words versus real words. Should we focus a lot on nonsense words or just when they come up? Yeah, that's a silly word.
Are you reading them or writing them?
We're rhyming them.
Writing them?
Rhyming.
That's fine.
Okay.
Language is language. We, on the blending board in tutoring, we have lots of nonsense words because we're teaching kids to read. And I'm going to tell you, some of the tests that assess whether your child can read or not are using nonsense words. Do they know what to do with the letters and the syllables? Yeah, so that's absolutely fine. And I want to say something else about writing. Andy and I have talked this many times. Your child, if they're writing, they can write stuff they can't spell. Invent the spelling. But the stuff they can spell it right.
Very good. Okay, well, thank you everyone for coming. Have a good night.